always felt alone. My whole life. For as long as I can remember. I don't know if I like it. Or if I'm just used to it. But I do know this. Being lonely does things to you. Feeling shit, bitter and angry all the time just eats away at you.
Doesn't respond well to questions about his personal life. He always goes back to the same place day after day, just watching it like it was yesterday. Despite the fact that it causes him tremendous anxiety, he insists on returning.
I am alone. I have forced everyone away from me. Because I must be alone. I have chosen to render myself dead to the world. I am a disease eating away at the kindness others have shown me. I'm a burden. I was always a burden.
The words that you heard at the start of the video were spoken by Simon Henriksson, the main protagonist of Cry of Fear. Even though they weren't written by me, if I said those words out loud, it would be one of the most honest things I've ever said. No matter where I've been, or who I've been with, for my entire life, I've felt like I haven't belonged there. I still remember my first day of school. On the way there, I thought that everything would be fine, but then I walked into the classroom. The realization that my mom was going to leave me in that room with those people was too much for me, and I just started crying my eyes out. I had to be pried away from her because I just couldn't let go. From her perspective, she was just sending me to school, but what I thought was happening was just cruel to me. It felt like every pair of eyes in that room was fixed on me. Well, they probably were. I was the only one crying. There was one girl who tried to cheer me up by showing me what she was drawing, but that didn't work. I just really didn't want to be there. I wanted to be at home, in my room, alone. Throughout all of my time at school, that never changed. I was always that weird, quiet kid at the back of the class. I didn't know how to get along with people, and I didn't really care to. I was bullied plenty because I wouldn't talk or fight back, and I wasn't the prettiest boy, so I guess it was just hilarious to run up to me and pretend that your friend was interested in me. I took a really long time to make friends. During my time in primary school, that's like ages 4 through 11 for those of you who aren't British, I made about 5 friends. There definitely were more people that I was friends with, but they either didn't last or I didn't like them very much and I didn't know how to get them to leave me alone. I also wouldn't count people who friend-zoned me. I did have an on and off girlfriend in school, but nobody was worse with the ladies than me as a kid. I was pressured into my first kiss with her because the entire bus was yelling at us to do it. I didn't know that I was supposed to close my eyes when I kissed someone, and I held it for way too long. She ended up opening her eyes after a couple of seconds and spat in my face laughing because I was staring at her like... I bought her a ring, and I couldn't hand it to her, so I just like threw it at her and it hit her in the face. I also bought her this keychain heart thing with her name on it, and I still have that in my room somewhere because I never had the guts to give that to her. We went on a school trip to London, and one night we went to see Wicked the musical. We all got to choose a partner to sit next to, and obviously I wanted to sit next to her, but she was already claimed, so was everybody else, until it was just me and the other person who ran out of options left. After things had ended with her, I developed a crush on a girl the year above mine, but I knew that that was over for me the second she started calling me Dude Zoid. I digress. I'm just admitting I have no riz here for no reason. Even with those 5 or so friends I had, I never really felt like I fit in with them. Something was off, and I didn't know what it was until secondary school. I'm not sure if every school does this, but when the last year of students moved up to secondary school, they got to have their uniform covered with colorful signatures on their last day. I'm sure you can imagine whose shirt didn't get signed that day. I should have taken that as my sign from the powers that be that my life was about to suck ass. Everyone that I'd just gotten used to being around was gone. Just like that, every class I was put into was full of complete strangers. That was bad enough on its own, but also the building was 3 times as big, and no one would help you find your class if you were running late. The lessons that I was already struggling a little bit with got much harder, and the teachers were kind of just assholes. That school had no way of accommodating somebody like me. I quickly came to realize why I felt like I didn't fit in. It's because I didn't. I was antisocial. I hated people. I just wanted to be alone. My anxiety skyrocketed. I became an easier target, and I was not having a good time. Nobody really liked me, and I felt that everywhere I went. All of my old friends made new friends while I was only ever able to make one. I put up with it all for a year, but when we went from year 7 to year 8, I lost it. All of my classes were changed again, so I had to relearn the whole building. Lessons got harder again. Still nobody liked me, and I couldn't do it anymore. I stopped wanting to go to school entirely, which made my already distant relationship with my dad start breaking down. It got to a point where he was screaming at me every day to get out of bed, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. All I could do was cry. I already didn't eat much, but I had basically stopped eating. I remember one day my dad had forced me to leave in tears, and I turned back halfway and came home. I think it was at that point where he realized that we couldn't keep going on like that, and he looked into taking me out of school. After some time making sure that that was what I wanted, and whether or not it was even legal, at the age of 12 I left. They took me off the register, and I just stayed home. I didn't even think to tell my friend beforehand. He asked me where I was one day, and I just let him know that I had to get out. By the way, this was a year and a half or so before Boy in a Band released Don't Stay in School, so that's how you know I'm an OG dropout. There isn't much else to say about my time in secondary school, really. The only fun story I have is the one where some girl that I thought was cute started messaging me back, and asked if I wanted to hang out when I got back from Wales. I met up with her and her other friends, and like an hour in, I overheard her say that I was annoying and that she didn't really like me, so I just went home. I understand why. No doubt I came across very strange, and I still needed to find out who I was. But that would take me some time. I've spent 99% of my time just as you see me now. Sitting alone in a dark room talking to a microphone like a madman. It didn't take long after leaving school before I started a YouTube channel, looking to become the next PewDiePie, obviously. Making videos was the first thing that I ever truly found any passion for, and it kept me busy for a year or two while my old friends completely forgot about me because they were busy with school. Anyone who didn't like me was quick to label me the dropout that gave up any chance of an actual future to pursue something that wouldn't work out. I guess they were right, because it never really went anywhere. Everything I made was so cringe, and I can't even bring myself to look back at it and laugh, and I basically gave up by the time I was 16. It was just much easier for me to do nothing with my time but play games and watch the occasional anime. The only times I really left my room were to go to the bathroom or to grab a soda from the kitchen. I neglected my hygiene for years because I was always depressed, and it was the last thing I cared about. I forgot how to speak to anyone. I forgot to eat. I was doing everything I could just to live comfortably, and that meant that I had become completely isolated. My entire teenage and young adult life was swallowed whole by anxiety, and I couldn't stop it. I had exactly what I wanted and needed. I was away from everyone, but I couldn't possibly live like that. I became so numb that it hurt. I couldn't even cry about it for years. I started to feel like everything would be better if I just disappeared. I want to start with a little trigger warning here, just in case. I'll be talking about some of the not so fun mental stuff I've dealt with. If you don't like hearing about that kind of stuff, then skip to this point. I also want to start by clarifying that I've never been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or anything at all. Reason being that I've never gone out of my way to check. I don't even really know how I would do that. I guess a therapist would be the first step, but I never thought that would work for me, so I never bothered. Plus, I'm too anxious. Regardless, I'm diagnosing myself. I 100% have an anxiety disorder. I probably also have a depressive disorder, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've had them since birth. There's always been something a little wrong with me. Or a lot wrong with me. And it's only gotten worse with time and with my experiences. I just gave you the context as to why my school life didn't help much, so I'm gonna share a little bit about how my personal life has affected me as well. I'm gonna get the awkward one out of the way first. I've been sexually assaulted. I'd rather not get into specifics, obviously, but yeah, multiple times now I've been put into sexual situations that I didn't want to be in, and I didn't know how to get out of. I'm still working out how exactly that's affected me, honestly, but I'm sure it has. It might have something to do with the reason that I hate being touched so much. If I don't welcome it, or if I'm not ready for it, it doesn't really matter who is touching me. It makes my skin crawl. That's something I can deal with relatively easily, but on some days it bothers me a lot. What also bothers me a lot is panic attacks. I suffer from them basically every day, and I have since I was 17. I don't know what the fuck happened, but one day at my mom's house, I basically just realized that I'm alive and that I'm going to die one day. And ever since then, every night as I'm trying to sleep, it makes me panic. Sometimes I just can't get it off my mind and it stops me sleeping for a while. Most of the time, it hits me like a truck as I'm falling asleep, and suddenly I'm awake and I can't breathe, and so I get up and I pace and I freak out and and slowly I calm down and go back to sleep just fine. Sometimes I don't even know what's happening. I'll wake up screaming at the floor in the hallway, or bawling on the sofa with my dad and girlfriend trying to calm me down, but I can't really hear them speaking for 10 minutes. As I'm sure you can imagine, that's not fun. I like to pretend I'm getting used to it, but it's getting worse, and nowadays it can happen whenever, not just when I'm falling asleep. My last 2 relationships were, to simplify it, controlling and manipulative. And I have all of the issues that you'd expect to come with someone who's experienced that. It's mainly caused me to just shut down emotionally, stonewall, I think they call it. I already did that before, but it got a lot worse after those. I saw a few things that I shouldn't have had to as a kid, and I spent a lot of time around drunk people that made me extremely uncomfortable, and that's affected me as an adult, because if you don't drink, you basically won't have a normal social life. Luckily, I don't think I have an eating disorder, but I've always had disordered eating. I personally don't think it's a big deal. I just stick to eating what I like, and I think that it should be my business, but people get so weird about food for some reason. My family treats me like I'm being rude when I don't eat at a gathering, and they won't shut up about it until either I eat a little or until I leave. Even if I ate before I showed up, sometimes it'll make people feel bad if I don't eat at a restaurant because there's nothing I like on the menu, but I'm perfectly fine just eating something else later. I don't understand why it's such a big deal to everyone. The only time it's ever really been a problem is when I'm really depressed and I forget to eat, and I end up looking like I did 2 years ago. That was a dark time. One of the many where I've felt suicidal. While I don't think I've ever been a danger to myself, like immediately, I've reached a point where I wished I was just gone, or I thought that dying would be a relief more times than I would have liked to. It's really easy for someone like my dad to tell me that I need to go outside and get fresh air and do stuff more, and that'll somehow fix all of my problems, but nobody seems to understand that dealing with all of this is easier for me than forcing myself to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. I don't want to go outside. I don't like anybody out there. There's nothing for me to do. I have no aspirations. I don't have a dream job. I don't have any talents. I'm pathetic. I walk around everywhere I go, knowing exactly what I'm like, and I hate it. The barber doesn't know that it took me 20 minutes of pacing around outside to work up the courage to walk in here, but I do. My family doesn't know that I just had a panic attack in the bathroom, but I do. My coworkers don't know that I'm a failed YouTuber and streamer, but I do. I feel like everybody I meet looks at me with the same vitriolic eyes that I do, but I know that they don't. That doesn't make me feel any better. I'm fatally flawed, and I hate myself. Despite all of this, however, there's something important I need to remember. If I was born in a different era, I would have simply died the most pathetic milk drinker the world had ever seen. But by some miracle, I was born during the rise of the internet. Halo released when I was 9 months old. Your boy was gaming out the fucking womb. No matter what I was going through, I could always grab a controller and lose myself in a game. That was probably how I coped with a lot without ever realizing it. Basically, everyone I knew thought that gaming as much as I did was nothing but a waste of time, and my brain was deteriorating by the second, and I was gonna die of some gaming-related illness by the time I was 14. But what they didn't know was that on the other side of my monitor were the only like-minded people that I was ever able to make meaningful connections with. I made more friends matchmaking COD Zombies when I was 8 than I ever did in school. Guys like Biddy, I don't remember how I met that guy. I never heard his voice. I didn't know a single thing about him. But we got to like round 34 on Derize, and I was having a blast. I'll never forget that. That guy went offline and never came back on. I sat there and I watched as hours turn to days, weeks, and then years. And since my PS3 is gone, I'll never see him again. There were these guys that added me on Facebook after we spent all night playing Ascension, and they said I was the coolest 9-year-old they ever met. I still see their posts from time to time whenever I'm bored enough to open Facebook, and they've all got lives and shit now. I wonder if they ever remember me. As I moved from console to PC, one of the first things I got into was TTT on Gmod. I found a server called Melon Server, and even though I was the weird, annoying 12-year-old, they only ever made me feel welcome there. I made friends with a lot of the regulars, and I'll never forget when one of them told me to get on TeamSpeak just to say happy birthday to me. There was a guy called Zeppelin, who I went on to play some other games with too, and I don't remember what they were, but I do remember laughing my fucking ass off at everything he said. This was right after Attack on Titan came out, and he asked me if I'd seen it. Obviously, I said yes, because that made me a lot cooler to him. And then he asked me what it was about. I got fucking owned. There is a small chance that he's watching this right now. We messaged each other a while ago, and it was nice. If you are watching, Zeppy, then I want to say thanks, man. You helped make my life a little more bearable. Right after the Gmod days was when I dropped out and started making videos. I tried networking by joining a bunch of Facebook groups for small YouTubers. Most of the people there put up with me pretending I knew what I was talking about, and some of them even collaborated with me. There was a guy called Gamma Fox from New Zealand who I think is still uploading consistently. Last I remember, he did Genshin stuff, and he took some time out of his days to be friendly with me, and we played TF2 and shit. That was cool because most of my videos back then were just me talking to myself, like I am right now. There was someone else I met around that time, but I'll get to him later. Now, on to CSGO. The game where I started taking improvement a little more seriously, and I met a bunch of other guys doing the same. I was 14 when I got into it, so I was a little less unbearable than I was in Gmod, but still most people didn't want anything to do with me. Most people except a little man who now goes by the name Igarashi Kureha since he's become a VTuber. How cringe. Imagine. Kureha was a couple of years older than me. Well, I guess he still is. I found him because he was a mod in an anime Steam group chat I just joined. I've never admitted this to anyone, but I used to join those and add random people that I thought looked cool. Most of them would ignore it, but when they would accept it and ask me who the fuck I was like, oh man, my Steam just adds random people, sorry, anyway, how are you? Kureha just accepted me and we never spoke, but one day I started spectating his CS game and he messaged me saying like, I see you, or some shit like that. Then I joined. And from there, he became one of my best friends instantly. We played CS for like 8 hours a day for ages, and that shit was the best. We would kill each other and get timed out for weeks and laugh our asses off because we were idiots, but we would also clutch up and make insane plays, and slowly we were getting better at CS. Without that, I wouldn't be nearly as good at mouse and keyboard as I am now. And I'm a beast. We don't talk so much anymore because he's We don't talk so much anymore because he's Japanese now. We don't talk so much anymore because he's Japanese now, but we're still friends 9 years later, and I'm sure he's watching, so arigato, Kureha. Anata wa yoi tomodachi da yo. Anyways, about that guy that I mentioned earlier, the one I met in like 2014. I found him through YouTube, and his editing blew me away. He was making the exact type of videos that I wanted to make. Naturally, since I was using Movie Maker, I asked him what he used to edit, and he answered that he used Vegas. Then naturally, I kept up with every one of his uploads and watched him religiously and laughed my little ass off. And then naturally, I found his Skype and added him. And we talked occasionally. He invited me to Smite a couple times over the next couple of years, but we only ever really typed to each other until one day he invited me to a Discord server with a couple other guys in it, and we played PUBG, and we got my first win. For those of you who haven't gathered yet, I'm talking about Myth. I'll never hesitate to gush about him because I'm so grateful. Myth is my best friend. If we hadn't met, you probably wouldn't know me. I wouldn't be making this video. I genuinely can't picture where I would be without him. I've spent countless hours laughing with him. We've played some of the best and worst games of all time together. And because he's uploaded most of it, I have access to infinite memories of all the good times. He's still the comfort YouTuber that I watch when I'm eating, chilling, or trying to sleep. He's always been there for me. We've talked for hours about things that I never thought I could be open about. We've never argued or really disagreed about anything. He feels like an extension of myself. I don't know how rare it is to find someone like that, but it must be because he's the only one I've found. It's people like him that make everything I just talked about worth it. If I could change anything that I'd gone through, but that meant that I wouldn't have met him, I wouldn't do it. We haven't even met in person yet, but I don't feel any distance. I can only hope that I've been able to give to him a fraction of what he's given to me. No doubt. No doubt Myth is watching this. Hopefully he isn't cringing. I'll shut up, but I need you to know that you mean the world to me. Thanks to him as well, I was able to spend most of my adult life so far streaming and providing for myself that way. That's how I met pretty much all of the friends I have now. It's how I met my boy Addy. It's how I met Clunia. Though it would have been nice if I had never met her, to be honest. It's how I met Hani, May, Kiyomi, Rina, your mom. All of these people I feel comfortable talking to. I think these are called friends. And of course, her. Zoe. My girlfriend. There aren't enough words in the English language to describe how I feel about her. It's just gone 2 years since we got together now. She met me when I was at my lowest. Without her, I wouldn't have begun to recover yet. She's watched me go from a timid, shy freak to a much better one. I owe so much to her, and I love her more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. Since we met, I've gained more control over my life than I've ever had before. I got a job that I never thought my anxiety would allow. I've made the first 2 IRL friends that I've had in actual years. One is my tattoo artist, who I remember being in the year above me at school, and the other is their partner, who happens to work at the same place I do, so fuck yeah. They invited me to hang out a couple of weeks ago. That's never happened to me in my adult life. Even though it wasn't exactly my scene, and I'm still extremely uncomfortable around alcohol, I had a great time. I'm finally proud of myself for something. So, I guess I was just hoping somebody could relate, either for my sake or for theirs. I've always felt alone. My whole life. For as long as I can remember. I don't know if I like it, or if I'm just used to it. But I do know this. I'm not alone. And I never will be. Because I refuse to forget about the friends that I've made along the way.